Think back to being a kid and getting a shot. The little vial, the quick sting, the band-aid on your arm, maybe a sticker for being brave. You probably never thought about it again. But that ordinary moment is one of the main reasons you are alive and healthy right now. Because of those shots, there's a whole list of diseases you almost certainly never caught. Measles that once blinded and killed children, mumps, and others that used to fill hospital wards and empty cribs every single year. For most of human history, childhood was genuinely dangerous. A lot of kids simply did not make it. Today, in much of the world they do, and a startling share of that quiet miracle traces back to one single man, a blunt, gruff scientist from a Montana farm whose name is on no money, no monument you've ever visited, no list of famous people you could rattle off. He may have saved more human lives than any other person in the 20th century, and almost nobody can tell you his name. His name was Maurice Hilleman, and over his career he developed around 40 vaccines, including 8 of the roughly 14 that children routinely get today. Sit with that. One man behind nearly half the shots that protect your kids, but I want to be honest with you from the start, because this channel doesn't do comic book heroes. Hilleman did not work alone. He led teams he built on decades of other scientists' work. And a couple of the things he's often given full credit for were really shared, and that huge jaw-dropping number of lives saved is an estimate, not a figure stamped on a receipt somewhere. The real story is better than the myth anyway, so stay with me, because to feel why this gruff, almost forgotten man matters so much, you first have to remember what the world was actually like before the shots you take completely for granted. So let's make this real and personal, because it is. Picture the diseases on those vaccination cards as they actually were not long ago. Measles wasn't a rash you waited out. For some children, it meant deafness, brain damage, or death. Mumps was a leading cause of acquired deafness in kids. There were illnesses that left children unable to see properly, or struggling to breathe. Every year, predictably, some families lost a child to something that today is just a line on a clinic schedule. Ask anyone old enough, and they'll remember the fear. The summers parents kept their kids inside, the wards full of sick children, the empty chair at a table. That was normal. It was the background hum of being alive. And then, over a few decades, a lot of those diseases didn't just get rarer. In many places, they almost completely vanished. So thoroughly that we forgot to be afraid of them at all. Forgetting the fear is the whole point. It's also why the people who made them disappear became invisible. And here's the part that makes this bigger than your own arm. When enough people around you are protected, the germ runs out of places to go. It can't find a chain of victims to spread through, so it fizzles out, and that invisible wall ends up shielding the people who can't be vaccinated at all. The newborn too young for the shot, the child with a weak immune system, the grandparent whose protection has faded. They're kept safe by everyone else's protection, by a kind of borrowed immunity they never see. So this was never only about any one kid avoiding a fever. It was about quietly changing the odds of childhood itself, for entire populations, including the most fragile people in them. And looming behind it all were quieter, longer threats, like a virus that silently scars the liver and can cause cancer decades later. The man who took on a startling number of these problems came from about the least likely place imaginable. Maurice Hilleman was born in 1919 on the hard plains of Montana into a farming family during years that would soon tip into the Great Depression. His mother died when he was just an infant, and he was raised largely by relatives on the farm, working chores, tending chickens, gathering eggs, and that humble farm detail matters more than it sounds, because eggs would later become one of his great tools for growing viruses. He was poor, sharp-tongued, and very nearly didn't go to college at all. An older brother helped make it possible. He clawed his way from a Montana State College to graduate work in Chicago, and he carried that farm bluntness with him his whole life. No patience for polish, no interest in charm. He was the opposite of a smooth, credentialed insider. He was a brilliant, irritable outsider who happened to be extraordinarily good at the unglamorous, painstaking work of actually making a vaccine that works and can be produced by the millions. His instincts showed early. In 1957, working in a military research lab, Hilleman read a newspaper report about an outbreak in Hong Kong and recognized, from a few small details, that a dangerous new flu was about to sweep the globe. He got hold of a sample, identified that it was a strain almost no one had immunity to, and then did the thing that separates a scientist from a hero. He raised the alarm and drove production. He pushed vaccine makers to mass-produce a defense before the wave fully hit, and the result was tens of millions of doses ready in time, a response credited with sparing a great many American lives in that pandemic. It was a stunning piece of foresight and sheer stubbornness, and it was only a warm-up. Soon after, he moved to the pharmaceutical company Merck, where he would spend the rest of his career and where he would build, one after another, the vaccines that quietly rewrote childhood. But to understand what he was building, you need to understand the simple, almost sneaky trick at the heart of every vaccine. So here's the whole idea, and it's beautiful in how simple it is. Think of your immune system as a police force inside you. With one big weakness, it's slow to react to a criminal it has never seen before. By the time it figures out a brand new germ, you can already be very sick. A vaccine fixes that by handing your immune system a wanted poster ahead of time. You show the body a harmless mugshot of the germ, its face, but not its danger, so that your internal guards can study it in peace, with no crime actually being committed. The clever part is how you make that harmless mugshot. One of Hilleman's specialties was taking a real dangerous virus and growing it over and over, generation after generation, in the lab, until it gradually went soft, losing its ability to make you sick while still keeping the same outward face your immune system can recognize. A weakened virus that looks exactly like the real threat, but can't hurt you. The criminal's photograph with the criminal safely defanged. And once your immune system has studied that poster, two wonderful things happen. First, it builds custom weapons, antibodies, that latch on to that specific germ. And second, and this is the magic, it files the face away in memory. Special memory cells keep that wanted poster on record for years, sometimes for life. So if the real dangerous germ ever shows up, your body doesn't have to start from scratch. It recognizes the face instantly and arrests the intruder before you ever feel sick. That's all a vaccine really is, a safe rehearsal, so the real performance never goes wrong. And when enough people in a community have had that rehearsal, you get that wall we talked about. An immune crowd the germ simply cannot move through, protecting even the few who couldn't get the shot. Hilleman's genius wasn't inventing this idea. It was doing the brutally hard engineering of turning it into real, safe, mass-producible vaccines for disease after disease after disease. And the most personal example began with his own little girl in the middle of the night. One night in 1963, Hilleman's 5-year-old daughter, Jeryl Lynn, padded into his room and woke him up. Her throat hurt, and her jaw was swollen. He was a vaccine scientist, and he recognized it immediately. She had the mumps. Now, most fathers would comfort their child and go back to bed. Hilleman did comfort her, and then, because of who he was, he drove to his lab in the middle of the night, came back with swabs, and gently took a sample from his own sick daughter's throat. He carried that swab back to the lab, and from the virus growing inside his own child, he began to build a vaccine. He grew the virus using, fittingly, chicken eggs, just like on the farm, and then weakened it, generation after generation, until it was that harmless mugshot, safe enough to protect other children. The vaccine he made from her became known as the Jeryl Lynn strain, named for his daughter. And here's the remarkable part. That very same strain, grown from a little girl's sore throat in 1963, is still the basis of the mumps vaccine that children get all over the world today. Your mumps protection may quite literally trace back to that one night. Hilleman also improved the measles vaccine into a milder, safer version, and then did something brilliantly practical. He combined measles, mumps, and rubella into a single shot, the MMR, so that children needed fewer needles for the same protection. But here's where I have to be careful and fair, because the popular story gets this wrong. Hilleman did the measles and the mumps. The rubella piece of that shot was not his. That component came from other scientists, Paul Meyer and Harry Parkman, and then Stanley Plotkin. The MMR was a combination of separate triumphs, not one man's solo act. And that pattern, brilliant, combined, shared, runs through his whole astonishing career. Step back and look at the sheer scale of what this one man built. Around 40 vaccines, a wall of them, measles, mumps, chickenpox, hepatitis A, hepatitis B, meningitis, pneumonia, and on, roughly 8 of the 14 diseases your children are routinely protected against today came in some form through Hilleman. And one of those, hepatitis B, deserves a special mention, because it was a genuine leap. Hepatitis B is that quiet liver virus that can lead to cancer, and his first vaccine for it was made by purifying a piece of the virus from human blood. Clever, but limited. Then he helped make a historic jump, taking just the harmless surface protein of the virus, a single piece of its face, no live virus at all, and brewing it in yeast cells using the new tools of genetic engineering. That became the first vaccine for humans ever made by recombinant DNA technology. It was, quietly, the future of vaccine making, and he was standing right at the start of it. And he did all of it as the least heroic-looking hero you could picture. Hilleman was famously gruff, profane, impatient, and completely uninterested in fame. He led large teams and drove them hard. He stood, as all scientists do, on the shoulders of the people who came before him. He worked in an unremarkable office, late into the night for decades, with essentially no public spotlight at all. He once joked that he'd skipped charm school, and he wore that bluntness like armor. He wasn't building a legend. He was solving problems, one disease at a time, because they could be solved, and somebody had to do it. And so, while his vaccine spread out across the entire world and quietly saved an almost unimaginable number of lives, the man himself stayed in the shadows, protecting millions upon millions of people who would never ever know his name. So how do you measure a life like Maurice Hilleman's? Honestly, you can't. Not exactly. And anyone who gives you a precise number is selling you something. But people have tried to estimate it. And by one frequently cited estimate, his vaccines may save on the order of 8 million lives every single year. Let that wash over you with the word estimate firmly attached. Not a ledger, but a serious attempt to capture something almost too large to picture. He died in 2005, admired deeply within his field and almost unknown outside it. And now think back to that band-aid on your arm when you were small. That ordinary, forgettable moment. Behind it stands a sharp-tongued farm boy from Montana who spent his life turning dangerous germs into harmless wanted posters, who once built a vaccine from his own sleeping daughter's sore throat, and who quietly handed the human race one of the greatest gifts it has ever received and then walked off without taking a bow. His name was Maurice Hilleman. Now you know it. If this one moved you, the kindest thing you can do is quick hit like and subscribe, so this small channel can keep dragging these quiet giants back into the light where they belong. And tell me in the comments, whose forgotten story should I draw next? I read every single one, and the next video very often starts with a name that one of you left there. Thank you for watching, and the next time a kid in your life gets a routine little shot, maybe think for just a second of the stranger from Montana who made it possible.